Afternoon, everyone. It's quite an interesting panel discussion. Actually, I used to work for John from Proudfoot, and I spent a lot of time working with him over a few years. And this presentation I'm going to give actually talks a lot about digitization. It's how do you do something that had never been done before for a customer that wanted to take an analog system that was very difficult to manage and monitor, and how did we took that system and we digitalized it and we delivered a dashboard and we delivered outcomes that they could work with and actually get real-time information, whereas in the past they didn't have any. And it's very interesting listening to that panel discussion. It seems like that's the exact digital journey that a lot of companies are talking about. So, I'm briefly just going to introduce myself. I'm going to talk about Inmarsat and what we do in mining, and because many of you may not have heard of us. Go through the Tailings Dam solution and a case study, and then we'll have some time for questions at the end. So briefly about me, I'm a mining engineer, and I work for Inmarsat. And tailings is something actually I've worked on for quite a few years. When I first started in the industry, when I came out of Camborne, I went to a mine in Finland. And we flew some guys from Canada halfway around the world to come and tell us about paste fill with our tailings. That was something we did, and at the time I thought, well, don't we have engineers in Europe that can do this sort of thing? But no, we flew the guys from Canada, and they turned up, and they plugged in their radios, and they were 110 volt, and it was 240, and they all got fried. And we spent our time on the mine doing our paste fill test, and one of the guys drove out to the tailings dam one day and got lost and didn't know what he was doing, and he sort of spent 2 hours beeping his horn because then no one could find him. And one day I went out and I had to collect some bags of tailings. So I had to climb down the dam wall and try and scramble up with 2 5 kilos, 10 kilo bags of tailings. And I fell down the wall and I slid in and I got covered in tailings and -20 and drove back to the office and sat in the sauna and sort of, that was my day. So tailings is very close to my heart, and it's where I started my business. And it's interesting now to be working on a system which actually takes away a lot of that pain and tries to make sure that consultants, we're paying them to do what they need to do, right, to provide that analysis, and that people don't have to drive out to a tailings dam for 2 hours to take readings from a data logger. To really get away from the stuff which, as miners, we don't enjoy. We find really, it's a bit of a problem, right? I don't want to pay a guy to drive around for 4 hours. I want him to actually be doing data analysis, to give me conclusions, to give me outcomes that I'm paying him for. I don't want to be paying him to drive out there to collect some information from a data logger, where there is no connection, where he has to take a sat phone and call in every half an hour to make sure he's okay. These are problems, and they exist everywhere, from exploration right through to production. You go to plenty of mines, and you drive 5 minutes outside of the pit, and your phone doesn't work, and your radio doesn't work. So how do we overcome these are really the challenges of today and the first steps in the conversation about digitization. So who are Inmarsat? We're probably the biggest company you've never heard of. So I guarantee you, everyone in this room, we have done something for you within the last probably 6 months. If you got on a plane to come here, we provide 95% of the world's cockpit connectivity for safety services. We're the largest global provider of in-flight Wi-Fi. We've taken away your last bastion of getting away from your phone. I'm sorry. If your ship is over 300 tons, we're on that ship. BHP, Rio Tinto, FMG, all of their ships, they all use our safety services. We operate the global maritime distress network. So if you're in trouble on a ship, you push a button and someone knows what's happened to you. And that's our heritage. For 40 years, we've been doing this, and we were founded by the UN in 1979 to save lives. And they launched Inmarsat 1, our first constellation. And this year will be the launch of Inmarsat 6, our next generation of satellites. We have our first launch from French Guiana in November, and next year will be Mitsubishi Heavy Industries out of Japan, and the year after that, I'm not sure, it might be SpaceX or someone like that. And we've been doing it for a long time, and we provide a global service. And for interest of people in the room, our biggest customer is the US government. They spend $250 million with us every year because of our capabilities and what we do. So we do a lot of things, right? And most people in the room, if they've heard of us, it's probably, oh, we got a sat phone. Got a sat phone in a drawer. You guys do sat phones, right? And yes, we do, but we also do a lot of other things that maybe we don't talk about enough. And one of the reasons I got involved in the company as a mining engineer was to talk to end users and customers and really see what do miners want to do. And this project came out of that, where we went and we worked with Knight Piésold UK, who's, they've spent 125 years in tailings management. And we worked with a big mining company, and they had a problem. How do we take 20, 30 dams around the world, 8, 9 different countries? How do we get all that information off the site? How do we get it to our auditor and to our central office and to regulators so they can see what's happening? Because we want to do better what we do today. We want to go above and beyond taking data from a data logger every 6 months. We want to get beyond that problem. So that's our coverage map. I think we're everywhere most people are. I'm sorry if you live up here. There's nothing for you we can do, I'm afraid. But pretty much everywhere else, I think we're OK. So we tend to be where you are. And we do a whole load of stuff in mining, and I'm not going to go over it. But everything from connected vehicles to autonomous backhaul services to we run safety services on Rio Tinto's train. We do exploration connectivity. I'm talking tomorrow with the guys from Imdex about actually how do we capture real-time data from exploration rigs so that you don't have to have a rig and have to wait for fire assay before you know if there's a problem. They're going to join us on stage and talk about a solution we developed. So, most major mining companies will use our services. I'd be amazed if they didn't have, a sat phone or a BGAN, which is our super reliable network that the global maritime distress runs on. Most of them will have something that one of our services. So to talk about tailings, where you've actually come to see this presentation rather than talk about Inmarsat, tailings is a problem, I think, as an industry. We can all agree, right, that the way we have managed tailings dams in the past is not the way we want to manage our tailings dams in the future. We have to do something different. And we don't even know, as an interesting fact, how many tailings dams there are. Nobody actually knows. There is an estimate, it's somewhere between 3.5 and 35,000 tailings dams around the world, maybe. And that's from the UN. The UN did the report. In the last sort of decade, there's been 10 very serious failures. And obviously, a few months ago, everyone saw what happened in Brazil. And of those 10 serious failures, we reckon just under, according to the UN, maybe it was just under 200 million cubic meters of waste water and waste materials were discharged to the environment. So tailings is a serious problem. And I think as an industry now, it's about time we probably address that problem in the way that we manage our tailings dams. So it's not easy, right? There are a number of issues around tailings dams, primarily safety. So how do we do something safer? How do we deal with our environmental risk and our CSR? We can't do the same things we've done. I think, just from a CSR perspective, we have to change the way we do. Connectivity is a perennial problem. That's why we got involved in this project. Because at Tailings Dam, I hear everyone today talk about production. They're all here talking about production, right? How do we do more production? How do we have better connectivity? I'd be very interested in all those companies. Do they have a smart tailings dam? Do they actually collect all that data manually still? Because I bet a good percentage of them probably do. They probably go out there with a data logger, or they collect that data and it's stored on the mine on an Excel sheet. I would be incredibly surprised if it wasn't. How do we deal with the fact that multiple jurisdictions have multiple regulations around this? Some say every 6 months, some say every 3 months. You've got to have an auditor come every 12 months, and that's on an operational site. And a closed site's different. That manual monitoring spend, the guy who has to get in a helicopter from a major gold miner, he told me they get in a helicopter every 6 months and they fly to a closed site to take information. The helicopter is like $5,000 an hour, and they send someone every 6 months to fly up there, take their data, and bring it back. It has not an efficient use of time and money, and yet the mining industry does it constantly. How do you deal with the fact that we have multiple suppliers? Every dam will have a different instrument supplier, multiple suppliers, multiple platforms of hardware. They've got to input from this, and they've got to log into this system, log into that system. They pull it all together, probably on an Excel sheet. The guy saves on his desktop, maybe. And he's the person who wrote it. Maybe he's got a macro. He leaves the company. The next guy doesn't know quite how it works, so he makes his own system. Where's that data being stored? What's the safety retention around that? How do we deal with that inconsistent practice? And finally, the data management. What are we doing with all this data? Data everywhere. Everyone was talking about it. I went to a conference last year, and there was a guy from a big company, and he said, our trucks produce 5 gigs of data a day. They weren't sure what to do with it, but gosh, that's a lot of data, right? We've got 20 trucks. We've got loads of gigs. So how do we deal with that problem? How do we get away from all of this data? Are we actually using it efficiently? And so we set about this project with this mining company, and NIP sold as a tailings management system. And, we said we have 3 things. We boiled all that down to 3 things. We have to make smarter and faster decision making. The system has to provide that to the end customer. it has to improve our safety standards. We can't manage our dams the way we have in the past. And I think one of the most important points is, and it's why we've had a lot of discussions with regulators and why we want to talk to mining companies and regulators here today and others involved, we have to support better regulatory compliance. We have to go above and beyond the bare minimum standard, because that changes country per country. What we need is an international standard that says real-time monitoring must become the base, because the minimum expected is usually, the very bare minimum that mining companies will just do, because that's what's required. And you often see companies say, well, that's the standard, so we're going to stick to the standard. We want to go beyond that. So what does the system do, right? These are high-level overviews, but yeah, you've got your cloud dashboard. Everyone wants a cloud dashboard, right? And we have the coverage. It was important to have a rapid deployment, and we could deploy in a couple of days because we staged everything in our office in South Africa, and we did all that work in the background. But I think these are some of the more important points up here, so I'll briefly touch on them. One, we're not just selling a box. Thanks, here's a box, go away, manage your tailings dam forever. We think it's really important to work with the customer, right? So what we said was, what do you want to do, right? And they had a number of piezometers and ultrasonic height sensors and things like that. And they were already saying, we've installed the system. Oh, can we have a camera? Oh, can we have ground radar? Or what about INSAR? How can we add all those things in? So we work as a managed service with a continuous improvement type methodology. How do we go from the system today, which is 1 point something, through to system 3, 4, 5, 6? What you want as a company is very different to what other companies want. So you have to work with people, because no two tailings dams are the same. And as the company we are, I'm not going to tell you how to run your operation, right? Tailings dams are very different depending on what your commodity is. Mining companies are experts in running tailings dams. Third-party auditors are experts. What we need to do is work together with technology providers such as ourselves and say, how do we help you on this journey? How do we deliver what you need? There's a lot of secure data management. Like I said, US government's the biggest customer. I think they know their security. But this stuff up here is probably really important. The system is standalone. It requires no power, powers itself with solar panels and a supercapacitor battery. And if my engineer was here, he'd talk about for 10 minutes about how it's super cool supercapacitor battery that isn't affected by temperature, and you could put a bullet in it and it still runs. And he loves it. But for us, it's just simple as it works. And if it's minus 40 or plus 40, it's not affected. It has a little wind turbine and a solar panel. It does what it needs to do. It runs for 4 days on its own. Even if it was cut off totally from its solar, it would still run for 4 days, reporting. And that was what the customer really required, right? They said, we work in some of the most inhospitable. They have a site which is minus 40, 6 foot snow. So the system has to run. And then they've got a site with electrical storms. How does the system deal with that? So we had to overcome a few things, but we've been doing this a while. We thought we could work it out. There's emergency failover, and it's sensor agnostic. So they've got all these dams with all these instruments. It had to work with the instruments, and this was one of the most challenging aspects. How do you take a vibrating wire piezometer that's been in the ground for 5 years? And the guy goes out and he connects to that, and he takes his data off it. How do you make that smart? How do you get away from that issue? And that was one of our biggest things. How do we take the existing instrumentation and make that smart so it reports? And that's really what we've been working on, and that's one of the crux of the system. So as an overview, just to make sure everyone's on board, we have our sensors. Let's say we've got half a dozen piezometers, a weather station, an ultrasonic height sensor, a seismic sensor. We take those, and what we do is we add LoRaWAN. And LoRa or LPWAN is just a big Wi-Fi network. It goes a couple of kilometers. It uses a slightly different protocol, but for all intents and purposes, as a mining engineer, it's a big Wi-Fi network, and someone else will tell you how it works. They report to the LoRaWAN, and we make these smart with edge devices. That goes to the edge, and that transmits over the BGAN, which is the low power, is the L-band service, which the Global Maritime Distress and the cockpit safety services run on. So it's got a 99.9% reliability. It's excellent for what we want to do. It goes to the cloud, and then from the cloud, we deliver that to a dashboard, and that's delivered to the company's requirements. They tell us who they want to log in. They tell us what they want to see, and we do that. And so as an example, this is a weather condition. So they really wanted to know when a storm was coming. They thought that for where their dam was, that was really important. Rainfall was a critical dam safety factor. So we detect the change. The guys get an email. They say, there's a storm coming, by the way. We're expecting 200 mil of rainfall. That goes to the auditor, the company office. They can then go through their decision-making cycle. What are we going to do? The auditor gets the email, oh, but there's a lot of rain coming. We better make a decision here. So he contacts the guys on site. They come together, they make a plan. We're going to tap off so much water, whatever it may be. They can implement that. They can monitor it. And we have a feedback loop, right? Something which was never done before in the past, that people would just, the rain would come, and then they'd see what happened on the dam. Never really did this was ever done. So just to give you an overview of the system, we built a custom dashboard with all the sensor types. They have their widgets at the top. They wanted their sensor health. They wanted their freeboard. They wanted their next rainfall. So we built that for them custom. They can log into the individual pedometer and see all the details on their interval at whatever time period they want. They can go through, and this is something that was really important for us, they can go through and build their own custom alarm sets and hierarchies. So they can work with their management company and actually say, what do I want as my alarm? What is a high pedometer reading? What is a danger for my freeboard or my spillway? We can build custom alarms, and then we can email you, we can text you, right? The guy, the CEO, he's got an Alexa in his office. He wanted to ask Alexa, what's happening on my tailings dam? It's just an integration piece. It's easy enough. And the nice thing about the system is these are hierarchical alarms. So if I send you an alarm and you don't do anything, I elevate that to the next person. And if they don't do anything, we elevate that to the next person, all the way up to the CEO. So he gets a phone call in the middle of the night. No one's doing anything about this tailings dam. We've had 4 alarms in the last 24 hours. So that's really what they wanted. They wanted that capability. We built an audit log. So it's a digitally signed, automated audit log. You can go in and actually add your comments and see those comments. You can't do anything about getting rid of them. So the auditor or the regulator can see what's happened. Why aren't you doing anything about these alarms? We can see they've all been audited. They've all been logged. And so in a nutshell, that's the system, right? And this is the first time we've presented it. This is really, for us, this is the cutting edge. We talked with this company in 2017. We've been on sort of an 18-month engagement with them. It's been a long process. We went to their site in the Americas in, I want to say, September or October of last year. And we'd already staged all the kit. We did our final inspections. We got the concrete pads put in and the fence to protect the things. And then we went in December once everything had cleared customs, which is a bit slower than we expected, but that's mining for you. And we installed the system. We installed it in 2 days. They had information before the end of the second day coming in, and we did a bit of training. The system independently pulls in over 100,000 data points a month. We could have done 200,000, but the question came, what are we going to do with that data? Right? This worked for them. This is a 10-minute interval system. We could have done different intervals, but that's what they decided they want. That was the level of data that provided them everything they needed to effectively manage their system. And just last month, they deemed it a success. That's how recently we've been doing the project. So this is a little bit about our path to digitization, and that's really the end of the talk when it comes to what did we do. But I guess, having seen everything else that was presented today and talked to people, it's interesting to see where the mining industry is in this process of digitalization. And it's really interesting to see where the mining industry concentrates its efforts at this moment. And when you talk to everyone, and rightly so, I guess, as a mining engineer, I used to be a production guy and talk about tons, it is a lot of production focus. And I think as an industry, when we talk about safety, we talk about on-the-ground safety. We talk about boots safety. We don't want people to get hurt. There's a lot of focus on things like tailings dams, but only after the horse has left the stable, right? As an industry, how much time do we spend on corporate social responsibility in terms of this stuff, right? You could take the system and use it for pit wall monitoring, or you could take it to use water monitoring. There's a lot of things you can do, but really as an industry on our digitization journey, we're right at the first steps of that. And we found that through this process of, there wasn't connected systems, or there were lots of things, or there were people who were still doing manual readings on some of their sites. They were all things that had to overcome, and I'd be surprised if a lot of that, even though Australia and Canada and places like that are at the forefront of mining, they have the most technology, they're still doing a lot of this stuff here. And that always surprises us as an industry, what we're still doing as, well, that's the way we've always done it, right? Or that's the way that it should be done because we don't have to go on the journey. And for something like a connected tailings dam, it's not adding a lot of money to the bottom line. Even though we can implement this system for less than the cost of an FTE, that person can actually spend their time managing the tailings dam as opposed to just going and getting data. So that, in the essence, is the end of the presentation, and we have some time for questions. So I'm more than happy to answer any questions anyone might have about the system or how we went about implementing it or the challenges we faced that I've not addressed. So there's a microphone somewhere.
Thank you very much. It looks a neat system. With a number of these tailings dams failures, the failing has not been the design of the dam, it's been the operation of the dam and the material that has been put into the dam. Have any of your customers or the consultants you're working with extended this monitoring? Because a lot of the stuff you're monitoring is after the horse is bolted, right? If you start to see the dam fail, there's not a lot you can do. What about monitoring the material going into the dam and sort of moving upstream, including that as part of your tailings monitoring?
Yeah, I mean, dam design and construction, that's not what Inmarsat does. I think it's probably an important thing for me to say. You know, we're a technology and a solutions provider, and we have a lot of capabilities in what we do. It's why we work with guys like Knight Piésold, because they're really the experts in dam design. But you know, it's important, right? If you have connected piezometers and connected height sensors and connected seismographs, a lot of the data trends, you know, will exist, right? You'll be able to analyze that. When we talk about big data, that's what we're talking about, is being able to see things happen. Very rarely would you ever see a failure of a pit wall or anything else that wasn't seen coming. And the big failure at Kennecott a few years ago was actually a great example. The Rio Tinto team saw that coming days in advance, and they evacuated everyone, and the pit wall failed, you know, as they expected. It was a little bit bigger, I think, but they saw it coming. And that's the thing about a connected dam, right? I don't think any sensor system will ever stop a failure. If there is an intrinsic problem with the dam may still fail. The point with these systems is that you would be alerted far in advance, and you would at least understand that a failure is coming, and you could take some sort of mitigating action. And that's the point, right? The way we've done it in the past is somebody drives around every day, and they take a look, and maybe they'll go collect some sensor readings every 6 months, or every 3 months, or maybe they'll collect them every week. You know, the point is that everywhere you go, it's done differently. And we've got a real push at the moment with regulatory bodies and mining companies. You know, we see a lot of the big miners say, yeah, we'll adopt the best standard. What we want to do is have a conversation and say, what is the best standard? Because there's no single international body that sets the tailings dam standard that all the mining companies adhere to. We haven't seen one. And we've seen a lot of them push standards out, but then mining companies say, oh, well, we don't work there, so we don't have to adhere to that standard. Or, well, we're not under that body, we're under this body, so we have a different standard. We want to see real-time monitoring and safety services of real-time monitoring become the de facto standard. And whether that uses our system or somebody else's system doesn't really matter that much. We think the industry has to go there because we have to do things differently. The way we have managed our tailings dams is no longer acceptable in this world. So we need to have something new. We need to have real-time monitoring. I hope that answers your question. Oh, excellent, okay.
Not really, maybe I didn't make myself clear. Was what about pushing the monitoring back into the process so that you can see what's coming that will cause problems? Right, so you're talking about monitoring the tailings dam. I'm talking about monitoring the process and the material that is flowing into the tailings dam, because it is often that material, and we've seen this in the reports for San Marco, it's that material that was flowing into the dam that ultimately led to the failure.
Oh, so things like iron ore slimes and those sorts of things.
Exactly,
yeah.
Exactly. So my question was, have any of your customers or these consultants you've worked with actually started to think about, well, let's take it back one step in the process and start monitoring the material coming into the dam and include that as part of our dashboard for the tailings dam health and safety, because it gives you that early warning monitoring the dam says there's a problem coming, but if you were monitoring the material coming in, you would have got that warning 2 years beforehand.
So we are having some of those conversations. They're not necessarily around that angle, actually. That's an interesting angle to put it. The conversations we're having are about how do you monitor from pit to port through process to customer. But actually, if you had a tailings dam system installed as well, you could link those together and then push that back even further to the block model. I don't think that's a conversation we're having today, but I think it's certainly a conversation probably for the journey over the next couple of years that miners want to go on. But when you talk to miners today, I think that connected capability of actually knowing what's coming out of the processing plant and what's coming out of the mine and when it hits the tailings dam, I think a lot of mining companies would struggle just with that first piece, right? And I think we have to try and eat the elephant one bite at a time. And probably there's a number of systems that in the end have to be linked together to do that. But I think that's a very important aspect, actually, and it's one that I think we need to look at in the future. Got about a minute left if anyone's got a quick question. Yeah. There's a lady here. Or a gentleman.
Oh,
sorry, mate. Sorry. Can't see who's at the back there. Oh, there we go. Sorry.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah, no worries.
Gavin Lee from Oceana Gold. It's probably more a comment than anything else,
mate.
Joe.
Go ahead.
Great talk. Thanks a lot. Some of the stuff you were saying around tailings dams, really, really important. We heard Jake Klein earlier lamenting about the reputation. Why doesn't the community understand the mining industry? You know, what's wrong with it? Unfortunately, we do 50 great things really well. We do one thing bad, and that's the thing that everybody remembers. Whilst we're having tailings dams collapses, whilst we've still got legacy issues with closed mines, we will have a poor reputation. It's not until we start really addressing those things. This is a great start. I know ICMM are working on a tailings dam standard, so there's your international standard, start plugging them. But until we start addressing the root cause, so we heard about looking at the process, looking at how we're constructing these dams, looking at what we're putting into them, things aren't going to change on our reputation. So thanks a lot, mate.
No, and it's important to say as well, like, I know we're over time, so I'll jump off the stage in a minute, but it's important to say, even though we're moving towards dry stack, we still have thousands of tailings dams that are going to need monitoring for a long time. So we have to at least take the legacy we have and try and make that as safe as possible. Because a lot of these dams are already constructed, and we're not going to take them down. We're not going to take them to bits. We might reprocess them, maybe, but many of them possibly not. So, thank you for your time.